I'm gonna briefly show you the new structure. If you open appcomponents.html, you can see an apptimer component with an init property. Here, I'm passing the number of seconds I want this counter to have. Let me make a spoiler. This apptimer is a stateful component, also known as a container. I'm not gonna enter the details, but if I go to the template timer component HTML, I can see it have an app progress bar and app display components as well as a button, and the two first are going to be stateless. So those will be components whose only task is just to handle how to display the information I'm passing from outside through the properties progress and time. If you open the progress bar component, you can see that here in fact there's no logic. The only thing you have is that input progress, that is what the parent component, the timer, will use to tell me from the outside, which is exactly the progress I have to show here. Moving to the template, the only thing I'm doing here is just to show this progress based on this input. So this component do not have to think about anything. The information it gets from the outside is the information it's using. So we don't have to think about how to obtain this progress. And that's why this is a dumb component. And the same applies to display component. Here we don't have any kind of logic, just an input, this input time. So if I move to the template, the HTML, what I see is I'm just showing the value of time. I want to change briefly this component in order to display minutes and seconds, and it will keep being a stateless component. So I remove this and I'm gonna create something a little bit more complex. I just create a div for the minutes, I put a separator in the middle, and finally I'm showing also the seconds. As you can see, I've changed the way to display the information, but I also have to define those variables, so I move to the TypeScript part of my component, and here I'm gonna create those two properties, a public minutes of type string. It will be string because I want to show a 0 at the beginning in case the number is lower than 10, and I do exactly the same for the seconds. So I show this string with 2 zeros. Okay, what I have to do now is to add the logic to transform this time into minutes and seconds. Pay attention here. Although it's a dumb component, there's nothing wrong on adding logic for internal usage. And in this case, what we are doing is just formatting the entry information. So here I will make the computations every time the input property is updated in order to get those properties, minutes and seconds. I'm gonna do this every time this property updates. So I have to do the onChanges lifecycle. The class have to implement onChanges, and then I have to implement this ng onChanges. I get the changes object. Remember that this object is receiving all the input properties of my component. So in this case, I only have time. If changes.time, then I get the minutes. That will be the current value I have divided by 60 and getting just the entire part. So I use math.track that gets the integral part of changes.time.current value, and this divided by 60. And for the seconds, I'm gonna do something similar, but in this case simpler, because the seconds are gonna be just the difference between the total seconds I'm receiving and those minutes multiplied by 60 in order to know how many seconds are those minutes. I've just created those const variables instead of assigning the values directly to my properties, because what I want to do here is just make sure that I'm showing 2 digits. An easy way to do this is by creating a string like this. This.minutes equals a string starting by 0 and then the minutes. So I put a 0 before the minute variable I get from here, so I can get the last 2 elements of the string. I can do this with the method substr starting by -2. That means 2 positions from the end towards the beginning, and as there are no final position, it means until the end. And with the seconds I can do exactly the same. This.seconds equal 0 plus the number of seconds, and then I substring -2. I can go to see the results now, but before this I want to change in the app component template. So instead setting a timer with 20 seconds, I can put 65, and this way I can also see how the minutes are also changing in the display. If I go to the results, it updates. I have 1 minute 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2 is going down, and then I can see how the minutes are also perfectly updating from 1 to 0, and seconds are going down from 60 as expected. It is very important to understand what we have just achieved. Thanks to this concept separation between containers, this app timer you're seeing here, and presentational components, those ones from here, I've been able to change completely the way to display the content, this from here, without having to change the app timer container.